So what was the reality like for you?
So I literally arrived on a Monday, and the only job I could do, the only job that was available was working in security. I got a tap on the shoulder by my supervisor and said, the store manager would like you to go home. And like, he doesn't like the color of your skin. I was basically demoted back to my, guardian in the building. There was a graduate placement vacancy, and they were looking for Black Caribbean people. So I sat down and applied. So I said, how do I make this one stand out? Then I wrote, I will give you 101% commitment. So apparently it caught the eyes of John Wilson, who was the deputy director of the state. He came to my interview, sat down. I'm going to change this interview. You're going to get this job on the back of this one question. If you were in charge of security for the University of Manchester, how would you do it? That's the question.
Change is inevitable, but change doesn't have to be the end. It's just a detour. On this podcast, we call Change the Left Turn. On the Left Turn, we speak to global trailblazers who have mastered life's unexpected twist, turning their childhood dreams into remarkable achievements. This season, we're bringing to you even more inspiring stories, valuable insights, and exciting conversation with amazing guests. So stick around to the end because we have something in store for you. Today on The Left Turn, we have a business executive with 25 years of working experience in the tech industry. He spent numerous years working on global HR system implementation and consulting with major international organizations and fast-growing SMEs. At the heart of what he does, he likes helping business understand HR IT solution, including bespoke of development and off-the-shelf technology. He's gained extensive experience in HR technology and data arena as a client, implementer of service, and a seasoned advisor. Outside of his professional work, he has a passion for empowering nations and people. The passion led him to creating Joshua Leadership Academy and a recently published book titled Managing Up Career Progression. He spends significant amount of time traveling across the world to empower churches and leaders. Join me on the left turn to welcome Mr. Sola Osinoiki, my mentor and a great boss. Thank you for coming. I do not take you for granted. I know you flew all the way to Nigeria to be here today. Thanks for being on the show today, sir.
Thank you for having me, Ajoke. I'm glad to be here.
Amazing. Okay, so we'll just dive into it. We know that people have childhood dreams, right? What was your childhood like? What is your family like? What did you aspire to be as a child?
So I am one of five. My parents had 5 children. I'm the second born, first boy. I was born in London. And my earliest memory of me thinking of what I wanted to do was I wanted to be a policeman.
A policeman?
Yeah, that was what I wanted to do. But when I was 8 years old, my parents decided that it was time for us to relocate back to Nigeria. So we came back to Nigeria, and my dad got a job with the Central Bank of Nigeria. I went through school, and I think somewhere along the line, the desire for engineering came in. So it started from being a policeman or detective to...
Why policeman though?
I think when I was in nursery school, a lot of the cartoons that we watched and a lot of things that we did was around cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians. So I wanted to be on the good side and be the policeman.
Detective and
policeman. Detective, yes.
Oh, amazing. So what happened after then?
So after then, when we moved back to Nigeria, I went to primary school, secondary school in Nigeria, and then I went to Obafemi Awolowo University.
Okay.
And on my way there, I wanted to do architecture, but you know how JAM is? JAM said that I could not enter for architecture, so I ended up opting for civil engineering.
Okay.
So I studied civil engineering at Obafemi Awolowo University.
So why architecture eventually?
Why architecture eventually? I think I started loving design and buildings and how buildings are constructed. I think maybe also tied in with the fact that my parents were at that time building a house. So I think I like the concept of creating something and building it. So when I couldn't get into architecture, what's the next best thing to architecture is civil engineering. So that's how the choice came.
Oh, nice. So you studied at
Obafemi Awolowo University. It was a University of Ife at that time, and then afterwards it became Obafemi Awolowo University.
okay. So after your school days, what happened?
So after I finished my university degree, I went on to do my National Youth Service in Agbo, Delta State, newly formed Delta State at the time. I worked as an engineer, built roads, market stores. Yeah, did all that was necessary. Really enjoyed my NYSC, and when I finished, they actually offered me a job. By the time, my fiance, who is now my wife, had relocated to the UK.
Okay.
And so since I was British born, I thought, oh, I might as well Jackpa is what they call it. But this was way before
So how many
Jackpa.
years ago?
Yeah, this is long, long, long ago. So my fiance was in the UK and I decided to follow her. But when I got to the UK, there were no jobs. So I had to reinvent myself. So yeah.
So in Nigeria, you studied architecture,
No, civil engineering.
civil engineering. Yes.
Worked
okay.
for
You
a
wanted
year for the
worked
government, yeah.
for a year for the government. Where specifically?
In Delta State, Agbo.
Delta State.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So and that's part of what happened. So when I finished my youth service, I got a job in Delta, but I didn't want to stay there.
Okay.
Came back to Lagos, started looking for a job, and at one interview, I have to say this, if you don't mind. I know in Brooklyn, they did me this kind. So my fiance was like, just come to England. So that's what I did.
So you went to England.
Yes.
All right. So what happened to you after England? First of all, what exactly was the reason why you decided to, aside your fiancé, was it why did you decide to Jackpot? Was it in search of better future, or you just wanted to join your fiancé?
I think primarily was to join my fiance.
Okay.
Because I never had, even though I was British born, I had a British passport, it was never in my mindset that I would move to the UK. It wasn't even in the forecasts. You know, some people have a dream and then I didn't even have that dream. But because my fiance had now moved and wanted to be close to her and to explore opportunity,
Okay.
I went to the UK.
So what was the reality like for you in
The reality of landing in the UK, well, first of all, I made up my mind that, because I'd heard so many stories that people come and they do this, they do that, they take government money. I was like, I don't want to do any of that. My intention was, if I get there, I need to work. So I literally arrived on a Monday, and the only job I could do, having applied to about 100 different companies and got no, the only job that was available was working in security. So my first job when I got to the UK was working as a security guard.
Okay. As a civil engineer.
Yes, BSc civil engineering, head of security. Yeah, so that's kind of how my journey started. But I think very early on in that journey, I coined a phrase that I still use today, which is, don't let your uniform define you. Because people see you in a security uniform and then they make they make a decision about who you are, what your background is. But actually, I was still a civil engineer, whether I was in uniform or out of uniform. And I realized that, whatever your hand finds to do, you got to do it well. And so I decided that, okay, this is what I'm doing now. I need to eat, and security is the job that I'm doing, but it doesn't define me. So it's on my journey to where I'm going.
Nice. So you decided to take up the available job.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm curious to what sparked your interest in technology. What was it about technology that drew your attention, especially that it wasn't a thing, it wasn't a mainstream in those days, right? So what exactly drew your interest to technology?
I think two things drew my interest in technology. One was, at the time, my flair for building had led me to writing. So I was already a writer. I had a magazine that I was doing, and I realized that desktop publishing was evolving. And my fiance, at the time when she was in Lagos, they had a dot matrix printer. So I would come to her house and then we'll print articles from there. So I think I got curious about how the computer works more from what I was seeing around me. And now that I'm in the UK, I was like, okay, so maybe I should, invest some time in it. So I started teaching myself tech.
How was it? What did you transition to? I just want you to give me a bit of your story of the different times you have to change career paths. Because when I was reading your biography, I read you have technology, you have HR, a lot of HR experience, right? So I just want to know, maybe just share
The
with
journey.
us the journey so far from being a security, how you came about HR, how you came about Joshua Academy. So I'd
Yeah.
just like to hear the journey.
All right, I'll tell the journey. So let's pick it up from I'm now working in security.
Yeah.
My first job in security, you have to remember that my mindset of what security was may God. That's all I had in my mind. But I didn't realize actually that in the UK, security was actually a profession. You know, some people actually go to university, they study it, and so there are methods to it. And so one thing I learned very early on in my working career was mentorship. And so my career mentor at the time, my boss, Amanda, she said, look, security is not as simple as you think it is. It's more complicated. And she taught me what it was to be a good security guard. And I became very good, got promoted. And then on one day, while I was being promoted, or in my new job, so I went from uniform to plain clothes. So I'm now working
Okay.
in a
Same with the
store,
securities.
still in security, but I
Yeah.
was a plain clothes store detective, if you like.
Okay.
So my ambition of being in the police, you see how it's combining
Coming
together.
back to it.
Anyway, so one day when I was doing this job, I got a tap on the shoulder by my supervisor and said, the store manager would like you to go home. I was like, why? I'm like, he doesn't like the color of your
Wow.
skin. And so I was basically demoted back to my, guardian a building job. And when I got there, my career coach, Amanda, said to me, look, Shola, you're better than this. You're a graduate. Like, don't forget. Like, yes, you're working in security, but you're a graduate. I think you should go out and look for another job. Look for a better job. So I went out, got another job, a better security job. And, I kind of started going up through the ranks in security. And then one night, I was doing a 18-hour shift, and I looked up, and there was a graduate placement vacancy at the University of Manchester. And they were looking for Black Caribbean people to apply. Graduate and I looked at myself, I'm a graduate, I'm Black. So I sat down and applied. And while I was writing the application form, I thought to myself, how do I make my application stand out? And by this time, I remember I've written about 100 different applications.
Yeah.
So I said, how do I make this one stand out?
Yeah.
And so at the back of the form, there's a box where they say other. So at the back, I wrote some additional things, and I wrote, I will give you 101% commitment. So apparently, it caught the eyes of John Wilson, who was the deputy director of the States, one of the departments I was going to be working in. And he decided that he wanted to meet this guy. Who is this guy that's talking about 101% commitment? So he came to my interview, sat down, and asked me a few questions. And he said, so what have you been doing for the last 18 months? I said, I've been working in security. He said, okay, I'm going to change this interview. You're going to get this job on the back of this one question. If you were in charge of security for the University of Manchester, how would you do it? That's the question. I'm listening. And so I think I took a combination of what I'd learned in the last 18 months, maybe what I read in James Harley Chase, maybe James Bond movies. I put it all together, came up with a 5-step plan. And at the end of the interview, as he was walking out, he stood by the door. He said, of the 5 things you told me today, 3 of them I'm going to implement on Monday. And you've got the job, by the way.
Oh, that's so nice.
And so that began my journey. Now, interesting thing was that it was a 1-year placement. And so while I was there, I began to learn about programming. And this is way back in the days of Lotus 123, Paradox, of those, like it's a long, long time ago. And I started teaching myself. At the end of the 1-year program, I won't bore you, but at the end of my 1-year program, my boss at the time turned to me and said, we like you. We don't have a job for you, though. Maybe if you create a job for yourself, then we'll have to expose it to the whole of Europe, because it was just the time that the European Union was coming into play. So every job, you couldn't just employ. I didn't even know why, because I was British. But anyway, they said that they had to advertise it across Europe.
Okay.
24 people applied. After rigorous interviews, I got the job. And so now I was the master of my own destiny. I've created this job where I'd infused it with IT. And so I began to teach myself how to code and basically automate the processes that we were going in. So this was like, I didn't have a boss who knew about automation. I was learning, going on Yahoo, learning. And I learned enough to feel confident after 2 years that I think, you know what? I think I can go out there and be a programmer. So I started applying. I would say I got lucky, or blessed is the word, where the agency who was going to place me found a job that would be almost like a direct transfer and another job which would be a stretch. But the stretch company was Oracle. This is back in the day.
Yeah.
And so they made sure that the interview was on the same day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And they put Oracle in the afternoon because they wanted to put pressure on the college to say, look, if you don't give him the job, he's going to go for an interview in the afternoon and they might give him a job.
Yeah.
So actually, before I left, we did the first interview, it went really well, I got the job. But they said, oh, there's a small, tiny detail that we need to cross the T's and dot the I's. There's a technical test you have to do. 10 questions. I'm sure you'll be fine. Send me off into a room, going to a technical test. I'm doing a technical test and I taught myself. So I didn't teach myself the way a normal program. I taught myself the other way around. And I'm looking at the questions like, I don't know jack. Like 1 out of 10, I know nothing. So I'm sitting there. Technically, I have a job, but without passing the test. And then Chris, my boss, comes into the room and he says, oh, how are you getting on with the test? We really like you. Like, come on. I said, look, I can't answer any of the questions. And he's like, no, you can. I'm sure you can. You just don't understand the question. So he went to the whiteboard, took a pen, and he would explain question 1. Then I'll say, oh, if that's the way I gave him the answer. And we did 6. He looked at me and said, you know what, leave the rest. All you need is 5.5 to pass.
Yeah, that's a pass mark.
That's a pass mark. So I passed, got the job. So now I have a career in programming. But before I started, 1 week before I started, he told me, he paid for me to come down. I was living in Manchester, the job was in Guildford. He said I should come down. Let me take you for a walk, he said. So he took me for a walk and he said to me, you know, after you left, every other person that we interviewed got 7 without my help. So I want to ask you a question. Have I made a mistake in hiring you?
Oh.
So I looked at him and I said, I'll give you 101% commitment.
You reminded him?
No, it's a different boss, right? It's a different scenario. So he kind of not heard that before, took my word for it. And I will tell you, within 2 years of working there, I knew when I was hired, I was the worst ever hire. But by the time I was leaving, I was one of their best programmers.
Oh.
And so that kind of took me on a journey. I was now working in legal IT. I got a job at GlaxoSmithKline. Interesting to say, when I went for the interview, my supervisor and I were both at the interview for my old job.
Wow.
But I got the job. So it tells you something. So I worked there for about a year. And while I was there, I was helping a lot of people who had issues with, discrimination, toxic environment, etc. And one of my colleagues looked at me and said, Shola, you like people, why don't you move to HR? There's a job opening in HR, payroll. Why don't you move to HR? So it was more like a peer mentorship that created the opportunity. I applied and they had to promote me to get the job. So he had to get approval from a VP who really liked me because I'd done some non-work stuff for him that he really liked. I arranged a town hall for him and stuff like that. He flew me to Philadelphia actually to arrange the town hall. So anyway, I get this job. I'm now in HR. And that's really how I got into HR. Literally almost by accident.
Interesting. How was the transition for you? Because it's coming from, I can understand the makeshift from engineering into security. Of course, the police
mindset.
And detective, right? And moving to programming, training yourself. And after getting to that peak of succeeding in that field, and you decided to move to HR. Again, what's the reason for that move? Was it a greener pastures or why?
No, actually what happened for the HR move, 2 things were happening. One was at the time, outsourcing had just started. People were now sending jobs to India. And I noticed that the main jobs that were going were programming jobs. So I'm like, if I stay in this programming job, I'll be out of a job. So I then navigated into business analysis. Now, because I was in business analysis, I met Luis. And it was Luis, after working with me for 6 or 7 months, he was like, Shola, you're so good, you like people, go to HR. So that's kind of how. So it was almost like navigating what was in front of me rather than, hey, I want to find an ambition, right? And I would
Yeah.
say it's only when I got to GlaxoSmithKline after working, when I got to Glaxo, I began to understand what it meant to have a career. Because up until now, I was just doing a job, whatever job,
Yeah.
put food on the table for my family. But now, when I got into HR, I began to understand the concept of career, the difference between a job mentor and a career mentor. And then I got my first career mentor who then began to say, hey, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? 5 years from now, what do you want to be doing? I've never been asked that question before. And so I began to dial the question back and ask myself, what do I really want to do? What does my career look like? What is career? What would career in HR look like in HR tech? And again, a journey unfolded and we are now here.
In HR. So, how many years did you stay in the career prior to HR? Because I mean, interesting to know that you only got to find out or build a career at a particular stage. How many years within that time, from school days to when you decided moved into HR,
Yeah.
and then like, okay, now there's something like I can build a career in this.
6
How many
years.
years? 6 years.
Yeah.
Okay, 6 years into.
Yeah, just into life. Yeah. So from graduation, 6 years to now saying, okay, this is the journey I'm going to go on.
So it means that it's not too late to
No, it's
build a
never.
career or
No.
start or
No.
understand it. That's interesting. You talked about a lot of mentorship, and I think I've seen one of your interview. You talked about your mentorship style. Would you like to tell us how mentorship has shaped you all through, and what is your own style of mentorship?
I mean, I don't think I would have succeeded in my life, full stop. Of course, without God, but without mentorship. And, I define mentorship as a mentor is somebody who has been where you're trying to get to and shows you shortcuts on how to get there. So, because mentoring is very different from coaching, right? A coach doesn't have to have been where you want to go. They could just encourage you to get to where you want to go. But a mentor has actually been there. They've walked in your steps. They can tell you that, oh, if you want to become a director in a consulting company, these are the things you have to do. These are the things I did, these are the things you have to do. And so mentorship is that shortcut that helps you bypass pitfalls, bypass problems. Doesn't mean you won't have, because if you bypass my problem, it means there is another problem you're going to face,
Yeah.
right? So I think mentorship is that added tool that it's almost like if you're in traffic, let me use this illustration. If you're in traffic and then somebody automatically now creates a flyover, and you fly over all those obstacles and you land at your destination because somebody who's already been there knows that there's traffic, knows that if you turn left, turn right, you get to where to get
Yeah.
to. So mentorship for me has been paramount, and it's been at key moments in my life, from peer-to-peer mentorship to mentors who are way ahead of me, who kind of then pull me into where they are. And yeah, so that's kind of how I would say. And I would say every pivotal moment of my journey has been guided by mentorship, right? By people sitting me down and saying, where do you want to get to? And then guiding me on how to get there. Because as you see, for my career, I went in-house. So I was working in HR, an in-house person. And while I was working in-house, I worked on a very big global project that made me work out of Philadelphia. And the guy who was on the other side said to me, you should be in consulting. Like you act like a top consultant, you behave like I didn't even know what consulting was, if I'm honest. I didn't know what it was. I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. And so I applied to Accenture. They rejected me. And then a couple of months later, they said, oh, we have a job that's got your name written all over it. And so that's how I got into consulting. And so,
Amazing.
again, a career change, right? So I moved into consulting, but still in the HR space. So HR tech consulting. And I spent another 10 years doing that. And after doing that, I went back into industry, went into work for a startup called Deliveroo in the UK. So you can see, like, my journey it's not been like straight. It's been a couple of turns, but
Yeah.
mentorship has been key in guiding me through that.
True that. That's interesting. Okay, so the HR tech landscape is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
How do you keep up to date with the latest trends and things happening? And secondly, what would you, seeing that you're so passionate, what would you share with or share or believe that is a solution that organizations can actually embark to be successful?
So, I mean, for this question, there's probably two answers. There's
Yeah.
a pre-COVID answer, and there's a post-COVID
Post-COVID
answer.
answer.
So before COVID, how do? You go to work, you go to seminars, you network with people, and you get to see what's going on. You hear what other people are doing, but post-COVID, LinkedIn has blown up with learning and
Yeah.
observing what other people are doing. There's online webinars now. The world has shrinked. Like, it doesn't matter which country you're in, you can see what's happening in Asia. I mean, I spoke at a conference in Asia, in Singapore. I spoke at online on conferences in India. So I myself have become a thought leader in the space. So I think the way I keep up is by using all the tools that are available, attend seminars, attend webinars, network with the right people. Again, use the platforms that are available to begin to see where the trend is going. And now there's actually a lot of people who are putting a lot of thought leadership out there. There's a guy called Josh Burson in the tech space, HR tech space.
Yeah.
Every year he does an annual, hey, this is what's new, this is what's coming. And then, he's become a guru in that space. So I think it's just following the right people, and then you get to hear what's going on. Now we're in the advent of AI, and AI is penetrating into so many different areas of HR technology. But I always say this when I talk about technology in HR, is that no matter how far we go, we have to remember that people technology or human resource is really about people. And so we should never lose that human element
Touch of it.
of it.
That's amazing. One last question. What would you say you would like to change? What would you tell your 18 years self? if
My
you have the
18-year
opportunity?
self. I think what I would tell my 18-year-old self would be, don't be fixated on anything. I studied civil engineering. I spent a lot of time trying to get a civil engineering job. But if you realize that actually life is full of experience, and your experience leads to new experiences. And actually, people always say, oh, but you studied civil engineering. I say, yes, but in civil engineering, there's a course we did, CEG 414, delivered by Professor Ogenengbe, and it's project management. And he came into that class, first day in the class, he said, I know that most of you here might not become engineers. But this class is not about engineering. This class is about life. Everything you do in life is a project. So if you pay attention in this class, you'll be set for life. And he's not wrong. I still have a WhatsApp group of all the engineers in my class. And half of us are not practicing civil engineering. We're doing all sorts of different things. But that project management philosophy and mindset that was taught in that class still guides and helps and navigates. So what would I tell my 18-year-old self? I would say, yield more quickly to mentorship, yield more quickly to a career than a job, yield more quickly to thinking long term, and stop thinking short term.
Thank you for sticking around. This season, we're giving our viewers the opportunity to be mentored by our guests. If you are a small business owner or an early stage startup founder, fill the link in the description to join the poll. Every episode, one lucky winner will be selected to be mentored by our amazing guests. Now back to the conversation. Would you say people don't have to go to school? Is school overrated?
Wow, you're trying to be controversial. Is school overrated? No, I think everybody's path is different, right? And I think as long as you get what you need to get from school, right, which is not just a degree, right? Because from school now, what you should get is your degree, your network, experience, and connection. So if you get those four things, whether you go to a university or you go to an online school or you go to a college, it doesn't really matter. As long as you do those four things, you will set yourself up. Right? I did civil engineering, but some of my very good friends today were in my class, right? And not necessarily in the engineering space, in other spaces of life, right? So I think I wouldn't say school is overrated. I wouldn't say that. But I would say that the world is changing, that if you go to school just to say, I got a degree, then you're way behind because we've passed that, right? I did civil engineering and today I'm a HR consultant. How does it even connect? Doesn't connect, right? But the principles and the disciplines of passing an exam, going through a process, connecting with people, submitting assignments on time, all those
Those
principles,
patterns, yeah.
patterns, yeah, come to favor you later on in life. And actually, you can see in the workplace, I've been privileged to have managed lots of people. And I can see a difference between somebody who's got a degree and somebody who just worked their way through,
Yeah.
right? There's a little bit
Struggle.
of a difference, right? And some good differences, some bad differences. The same way, I see a huge difference with somebody who's worked for a consultancy firm and somebody who hasn't. And at one point in my career, I wouldn't hire you unless you worked for a consultancy. Because of the organization I was working with, we were solving problems every single day. We were a global company in 108 countries. We were servicing 81 companies. I was like, it's not, when you come to work, when you wake up in the morning and you come to work, and I was like, good morning. When you open your email, it could be a problem in Brazil, it could be a problem in India, it could be a problem with one of our payment companies, with our online businesses, it could be e-commerce, it could be edtech. You don't know. So if you're looking for order, we're not the place for you. In fact, in my job description, when I got this job, they said to me, if you like structure and order, this is definitely not the job for you. So therefore, I realized that the best people to hire for this kind of a job are people who were consultants. And I tested my theory. Hire somebody that wasn't a consultant, hire somebody that was a consultant. The consultant flew all the time. The non-consultant struggled and eventually left because it is such a fast pace. Now, if this was a normal company that goes through the normal mundane rigor, maybe a consultant will get bored, right, with a consultant background. But somebody who has a consulting background has the ability to change, adapt fast. And the environment we were working in required change, adaptation fast. Because one day you're solving problem A, you come tomorrow, you're now solving problem C. And business requires you to move fast and be agile. When I was working for Deliveroo, everybody who was in my team, I had a team of 13 people. The oldest member of my team was 28 years old. 28. My head of tech, my head of administration, my head of policy, everybody was under 28. My youngest staff member was 21. And we did things that even as a consultant would take me 3 years to do. We did it in 9 months. Rolled out 50 global policies. We churned, there was an attrition of 100%. Everybody that we hired that year, we lost that year. So think about that. From a learning and development, from a business continuity, right? We were moving at the speed of light. And at the same time, we were rolling out new countries, right? Deloitte said in 2017, Deliveroo grew 100,000%. So think about the amount of transformation and change that's happening in a business that's growing 100,000%. So that's just to say that sometimes you need a certain type of personality, certain type of person to be able to move and be agile around business.
Interesting. Even though something is ticking something somewhere,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the question anyways. And it's something that has actually been in my mind. And you also just mentioned about you rather recruit someone that is in the that has a consulting experience. So how do you, as a HR experienced HR person that you are, right? I feel like or better still, let me rephrase the question. Don't you think it's how do companies imbibe innovation for bringing same people from the same setup? Because that happens a lot in banking.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I rather prefer person of banking, oil and companies. They want that background. So what happens to those people that, in quotes, are not in that line and are coming with innovations? What happens? What advice would you give?
So remember I said I would prefer to hire people who have a consulting background. And there's a reason for it. It's because of the nature of the work. So it doesn't mean I only employ consulting people. But to your question is, not everybody who comes from consulting is the same either, right? So let's just take a small poll. You have the big four, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, Ernst & Young, right? But then you
Yeah.
still have the Accentures, the Capgemini. It's like the pool is large, right? So even when I say I want somebody with a consulting background, even if they just spend 1 year in it, I'm not saying that they must have been I'm not saying I'm hiring only from consulting. I'm saying I want them to have that background in consulting. And the question you're asking is, how do you make sure that innovation is not stifled if you hire people who are the same as you? Now, having a foundation of being the same does not necessarily mean that we all have to act and behave the same, right? It's just that we're saying your thinking foundationally is directed at innovation, right? Now, I think that if your leaders are not innovative, no matter how much Wakanda innovation you want to do, you're going to be stifled,
Yeah.
right? So you think about someone like Virgin, Richard Branson. He only got into Virgin Airlines because somebody in his team came up with an idea
Yeah.
that why don't we do this? And the many brands that he's created came from allowing his team to bring ideas forward. So I think hiring people from the same background will be more of a problem if you don't have people who allow innovative thought at the top. Because I think at the end of the day, like there's a story I had when I was working for Accenture, and we had a problem, and the team of 20 of us are sitting in a room, and my manager, who had gone to tell the client an untruth, is the best way to say it, comes in and said, how are we going to solve the problem? So I put my hand up. I said, oh, I know how we can solve this. And he looked at me. He said, why do you have your hand up? I said, I have an idea. And he said to me, you're a consultant one. Look at the room. I have senior managers here. I have managers here. I have consultant twos here. If I need an idea, I'll ask them, not you. Put your hand down.
Okay.
Yeah? Now, luckily, I had senior managers who knew my work. And so they came behind the scenes and said, look, just tell us that idea. We won't tell him, but we will acknowledge that you know. So in the end, they executed my idea, but they couldn't tell him that it was my idea. You know?
Oh,
So that's what I'm saying, that I had an innovative solution, but that solution could have been
sometimes.
lost because I had a boss who just didn't think that
That's what I
I don't, he
do.
said, I don't pay you to think. I pay
Wow.
you to do.
Wow.
So guess what? I was out of there soon enough, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so what do you do now? So
So what
let's
do I do
see
now?
here. What you do now?
So what I do now, maybe just to kind of close out the story, is like about 2 years ago, I was made redundant. Story of another day. We won't tell it today. But I was made redundant. And then I took some time out because I was given a lot of money and a lot of time to really reflect on what do I want to do next. And I thought to myself, I spent almost 25 years in the corporate world, holding out somebody's agenda, somebody else's agenda. I was a very corporate person. In fact, when I left PwC, people were shocked that I left. I had a team of about 100 people. They were like,
Yeah.
Oga, well, you are a milestone, right? And I still mentor some of them today. But I think coming out of it, went traveling, went to see the world, came back, and I thought, you know what, I want to work for myself now. I want to do what I'm doing, but work for myself. So I've kind of recreated myself into 4 things that I do. One is I do consulting. So kind of my history in consulting comes in the human resource technology space. So that's one thing I do. Second thing I do is I develop something called Josh Leadership Academy.
Yeah.
Having been a benefactor of mentorship, I thought the best way I could do is to give back. And so I've set up an academy where I coach and mentor to empower professionals and founders to envision a better future. And then the third thing is publication. So I've always been in the publication space. And actually, when I decided to go into IT, it was the publication, it was almost like to solve the problem of desktop publishing, I wanted to learn IT so I could publish. And so now I've written books on career. One of them is, you talked about in the beginning, managing the art of managing up for
Yeah.
career progression, and a more recent one called Managing Sudden Change for your career journey. And then the fourth area is advisory services, and I do I would say a little bit of angel investing, where I invest in startups to kind of help them navigate early stage startups. And yeah, so that's so now I do four things, if you like. So I've now gone to more a portfolio of work rather than a specific piece of work.
How is it for you? How do we or people participate? How can they be, or how can they be beneficiary of what you do? I know you talked about mentorship.
Yeah,
The program that's just academic,
yeah.
right? Just leadership academic. How can people
So we're gonna
enroll?
hopefully we'll put some links at the end where
Okay.
people can apply for mentorship.
Okay.
It's not free, by the way. Just to put it out there, and coaching, and then consulting. Like particularly if people are trying to solve HR solutions. So what I do in the HR space now is
Yeah.
a lot of people have spent a lot of money on HR tech. It's not cheap. Doesn't matter which country you're in, it's not cheap. And some places they spend millions. I've implemented systems for $5 million, $6 million, right? And after you implement this system, people are not getting the benefits from it. They're not getting the juice from the orange. And so what I've gone back to start helping companies to do is say, hey, you invested 5 million in a technology. You're in a 5-year deal. You can't get out. So in these 5 years, how can we help you get the best out of your investment? So that's kind of what I focus on. And that's true about HR technology, but I've now realized that it's actually true around business. So I'm helping
Yeah.
businesses now in the consulting space to say, okay, I have this business idea, I'm implementing, I'm a founder. How do I actually now generate? So creating value is kind of what I do. So people who are looking for that, hey, reach out on LinkedIn or on one of the links below. Definitely buy my book. They're now available on Amazon. But there's also a link for Paystack that we would do. You get it a little bit cheaper if you buy it on Paystack. And then for advisory services, that's something that is, there's a bit of it's out of relationships really. And then there's a way we compensate. You compensate me, I compensate you. So that's it.
Amazing. Congratulations on the launch of your book.
Thank you.
Managing Up Career Progression. So what inspires you to write this book, and what do you hope readers will take away from it?
So
I
what
guess this is my copyright.
Yeah, that's a copy. So what inspired me to write the first book, which was The Art of Managing Up for Career Progression. I'll talk about that first, and I'll come and talk about this.
Okay.
What really made me think about that was I was reflecting on my own life journey and realized that actually I never really had line managers who helped me up in my career. And I was always having to manage my manager to get me a promotion, to get me, I was the one always going, having
Ask
to
for it.
navigate, or opportunities come and then somebody has to go and plead on my behalf to get double promotion or whatever. And so I wrote this book, Art of Career Management and Art of Managing Up for Career Progression, because I wanted to help people manage their career in a healthy environment and in an unhealthy environment. Because in a healthy environment, how you manage your manager is very, very different. But if you're in a toxic or unhealthy environment, how you manage your manager is very different. And so the book talks about both things. Then this book, How to Manage Sudden Change in Your Career, I looked at my life and I was like, there's been so many changes for many different reasons. And then more recently, I was made redundant. And I was like, if I had to navigate that, what did I do to navigate it? So I basically wrote out 7 principles of how I navigated my own career change. And hopefully that will inspire somebody else out there to navigate theirs. I gave a book to a lady yesterday who was like, oh, I'm so grateful because I've just lost my job and I'm thinking, what do I do next? Right? And I feel a little bit bad now because I titled the book Managing Sudden Change for Your Career Progression. I should have just said Managing Sudden Change in Your Journey, because it's not just about career. You could be a business owner, you could be a mom. I talk about the loss of a child that we had and how that impacted us as a family, and how life happens to you, but your career, what happens to your career? Okay, yes, I'm not a woman, but if you lose a child, you still feel it, And I talk about my journey in that and how my bosses responded to that negatively, if you like, and how I had to navigate through that. And so I wish I'd called it Managing Sudden Change for your life journey.
not
Because I
necessarily
think
career.
not just career, no, but it does focus on career, but it also talks about life. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. This is a lot. Thank you so much for sharing, and also for the book. All right, there is going to be a lucky winner that will be mentored by you after 2-3 months of mentorship. And so we have a list of some SMEs who have shown interest. So we have one of our mentors pick out one of the lists for a lucky winner that you're going to be mentoring. So please do us the honors to pick one of the person.
Drum roll.
Yeah.
All right. I picked at random.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen.
And the winner goes
And the
to
winner of this experience is
Yes.
Mary Blossom Onyeka of Marion Stores.
Oh, amazing.
All right.
All right. So you're the lucky winner to be mentored by Mr. Sola. So this has been a very interesting conversation. Thank you for sticking around to the end. There's going to be a link there's going to be a link on the description. We'll have the link to Mr. Shola's different mentorship program, the Josh Academic, how you can purchase the book. That is going to be in the description. You also have a link where if you're in an upcoming SMEs or a business owner and you want to be mentored by one of my guests, it's like a free gift from the left turn to you. So if you're interested, there's also going to be a link that you're going to fill, and you might be the lucky winner of the next person, the next guest on my show. If you also would love to have some people on the show as well, you can put the names of the people you would like to have on the show, and then we'll get them there. Thank you so much for sticking around, and see you next episode.